So this next speaker, she's smart, she's funny, and she's by far my favorite speaker for sure in the world ever. Yeah. But really, she has an incredible transformation story. I noticed that potential 12 and a half years ago. That's why I put a ring on it. Current, that's the only thing I practiced. Current Air Force reservist, my sugar mama, Melissa Boatwright.
It's funny because it's true. Hi, everybody. Again, Dave Chastain. I read his speech. It's amazing. We'll get him back on the stage. But for now, you are stuck with me and my veteran story, which starts in San Diego. This is me. You see, my dad enlisted in the Navy. That's the beginning of my veteran story. He enlisted in the Navy when he was 16 years old. He was so young that he had to get his parents' permission to enlist, and he went to boot camp 4 days after he turned 17 years old. He spent 3 years in the Navy, but my dad was born and raised in Wyoming, and he was homesick, and he wanted to go home. My mom also was born and raised in Wyoming, was my dad's sister's best friend. So they grew up together. They'd basically known each other their whole lives. And here, he leaves the annoying younger brother, and he comes back, this world-traveled Navy veteran, and my mom is like, ah. And they fall in love, and they get married, and they have me. And my dad joins the military once again. He joins the Navy again in 1979, and we get stationed in San Diego, which is where this picture was taken. But my mom was living that hashtag military spouse's life, and it is not for the faint of heart, as those military spouses know. She's in this giant city compared to Wyoming. She doesn't know anybody. Her husband's at sea the whole time. She's got a fucking terrorist, like a child that she's trying to take care of that sticks earplugs up her nose and has to go to the doctor to get them surgically removed. And she is like, I think we need to go home. And so we did. We went back to Wyoming. And that's where I grew up. When I was 10 years old, we moved from the big city in Wyoming called Casper, Wyoming, which is about 50,000 people. It is the second largest city in the state, to a town of about 5,000 people called Douglas, Wyoming. And my dad at that point had again rejoined the military, this time as a mechanic in the Army National Guard. And as my dad was, this is my dad, by the way, in the Navy. Look at that. Hey, Dad. And as my dad was wont to do at that time in my life, he was like, Melissa, I really think you should join the military. And I'm 14, 15, 16 years old. And finally, I'm like, look, man, it's not for me. I'm not going to join the military. Quit bringing it up. I don't appreciate it. Because you see, I was a super nerd. This is me at the academic decathlon, right there. I won a gold medal for writing an essay about genetically engineered tomatoes. This was my nerd gang. Those are all my closest friends from high school, some of which I'm still friends with today, all of which have graduate degrees, some are PhDs. We are hashtag nerd gang. And I was really committed to this truth. The military is not for me. There's something else in store for me. And when I graduated high school, I went to junior college on a theater scholarship. I paid for college by acting because my parents weren't in a position to pay for it for me. On the right, I was playing Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird, for those of you who've read the book. On the left, I was in the chorus of the Mikado, and I loved the theater. Loved it. The community actually is very veteran-esque because it's so tight-knit and a little bit quirky. They play by their own rules. You guys, sorry everybody on the internet, earmuffs, I was broke as fuck. No joke. I had 2 roommates in a 1-bedroom apartment. I still couldn't afford to eat. And it was not uncommon for me to come home and we didn't have electricity. Like, if it wasn't for the generosity of other people in my life, like my roommate's grandmother buying us literally cases of ramen, I'm not sure I would have made it through those years. And I was studying to be a broadcast journalist. Like, that's what I wanted to do. I loved Hannah Storm. I loved Oprah Winfrey. I was like, I'm going to be a sideline reporter. Like, this is my jam. I love the Denver Broncos. They're not that great this year, so never mind. But I'm in Wyoming. Like, I just can't see it. I can't see, like, how do you get from here to there? And I didn't know what to do. And so I'm telling my dad this, and he's like, I know you don't want to hear this, but they have broadcasters in the military. Well, that was all it took. Like, he should have led with that, right? So I graduated. Hey, somebody's seen me on AFN. What? So I finished my associate degree, and I joined the Air Force. And I was a radio and television journalist. This is a hilarious story because I randomly have people who've seen me on television around the world. Thank you for calling that out. I moved, for those of you who've been in the military, I moved 8 times in 10 years, if you count basic training and tech school. And instead of sort of taking you through my military career, I thought I'd share a few things that I'm really proud of about it. The first is that it's super trite, and I know you hear it all the time, but I saw the world. I am from like nowhere, Wyoming. People where I'm from go to 5 countries, and I've been to 25. You know, I've been to almost every state in the union. Like, this is amazing to me, and I'm really proud and grateful for the impression that travel has made on my life and the human that I've become. Second is, I finished my degree while I was in the Air Force. You guys, thank you. I mean, I earned every single one of those claps because it took me 7 years to finish those 2 years of school. 1 class at a time, 2 classes here and there. Almost failed a communications and law class, but whatever. It was hard. And in my extended family, I am the first college graduate. And that's really, really important to me. Thank you. In the military, I'm really proud that somewhere along the way, like, I got my shit together. For those who haven't been in the military, when you join young, I joined at 19 years old, your first 3-4 years are like what I imagine going to college is like. You're in a dorm, there's no supervision, you got to get yourself to class. Like, I was not great at that stuff, you guys. Like, seriously, not great. And it got time for me to re-enlist, and I was like, I was 4 and out, right? I'm out. And then I got to 4 years, and I was like, oh, I'm not ready to get out. I don't have my shit together. I need 4 years to get my shit together. So my 5th assignment was at the Pentagon. I worked as a beat reporter from New York City to North Carolina for the Air Force News Agency. While I was there, I did stories about Capitol Hill and with the Chief of Staff of the Air Force and the Secretary of the Air Force. I helped launch the Pentagon Channel. I went to Baghdad, and basically when I was in Iraq, I just like hitchhiked on helicopters to forward operating bases. I would stay there for 10 days, shoot a bunch of stories, come back to Baghdad, produce them, and send them out to news agencies. And somewhere along the way, like, I started to like figure out what it meant to be a grown-up. My last 2 years I spent in South Korea, my second tour in South Korea. And in South Korea, I finished my undergraduate degree. I paid off all my credit cards. I know what? I saved some money. I sold my car that I loved, but was ridiculously impractical because it was a Honda S2000. Thank you, Javier. I put that in there just for you. And I met my husband, and I was ready to start a new life. Like, I was ready. The last thing I'll say that I'm proud of is proud that I got out. I was at 10 years when I got out. And 2 years, you know, about that 2-year mark before you get out, people ask you, and I'm like, yeah, I'm getting out. And they're like, what? Why would you get out? You seem amazing. Like, this seems like a great place for you. Like, you're halfway there. You only have 10 more years. And I'm like, only 10 years? What? What? 10 years seems like a long-ass time. I just knew in my heart that the military wasn't the right place for me anymore. Like I felt like once I got my shit together, I felt like I was like, it was holding me back. Like I kept hitting the ceiling that I couldn't quite do anything about. And it wasn't in my power to do anything about. And so, like my dad, I got out and I moved home to Wyoming. So I went home to Wyoming. I was a 27-year-old Air Force veteran, a college graduate. I was living in my parents' basement, and I was on unemployment. Now, if that doesn't make you reconsider your life choices, I don't know what will. You're like, I think this is right, but it does not sound pretty. And it takes an intense amount of personal faith to know that you're going to figure it out. You don't even know what it is, but you're going to figure it out. It also takes an amazing amount of support from your community. So my parents gave me a soft place to land. My boyfriend at the time, now husband, had unwavering belief that I was going to figure it out and that I would be successful. And it took me 3 years to believe in me the way that he believed in me. And so in those 3 years, I finished my graduate degree. I got picked up for a commission in the United States Air Force Reserve. So for those of you who aren't in the military, that means I went from being an enlisted person to an officer. I moved to South Carolina because that's where Corey was stationed. I applied for an online job posting, didn't know anybody in the company, and got hired at an international law firm that's famous for its litigation in tobacco and asbestos. I know. Folks, don't try this at home. I don't recommend it. And then a couple years later, Corey was getting out. So we moved. He was accepted to a school in Philadelphia, so we were moving up north. Again, applied for a job, didn't know anybody, applied to an online job posting, and started working in Philadelphia at Thomson Reuters as a senior communications specialist, which meant basically that I was partnering with executives to figure out how they engage their global organizations. And it was one of the first times where I was sitting in rooms with people who are 20 plus years older than I am, watching them like navigate corporate strategy. And then they would look to me and ask me, "What do you think, Melissa?" And I realized in that moment, A, I had an opinion. B, I thought my opinion was good. And C, like, I wasn't flustered. You see, I had been in rooms with generals and secretaries of the Air Force and all these other people that outranked me and held my own. And so I was comfortable in these spaces and I wasn't easily intimidated because I had already done shit that was way harder than this. So fast forward a couple years, I end up running the team that I got hired into. Around that time, Corey was graduating from college, so we were thinking about where do we move next? Do we go to San Francisco? Do we go to Washington, D.C., which is where I was being promoted to, because that's where the role was. And my company said, "You go where you go. We'll support you no matter what." And I was like, this is amazing. Corey gets a job in San Francisco. We pack up all our shit. We move to the Bay Area. Literally the day after we signed our lease on our apartment in Mission Bay, my boss calls me and says, "Hey, your leadership's not supportive of you living in California." And I was like, well, that's unfortunate because I live here. And I didn't know what to do about that. So I kept working. And as sometimes happened, the universe opens a door. And so a few months after that had happened, my company hired its first ever Bay Area CTO, and he wanted a chief of staff. And I had already kind of figured out that comms was not my bag. Like, I wasn't going to do that for the rest of my life. It's just, I'm good at it because I've done it, but I don't really love it. And so I ended up working for this chief technology officer of our company for 3 years. First as his chief of staff, driving transformation and change and operational efficiency, bringing different development methodologies to our organization. I helped lead the technology workstream for the $3.5 billion divestiture of our division from Thomson Reuters. I got promoted to vice president. I ran the engineering PMO, the program office. I was one of the youngest vice presidents in our organization, and I had like unbelievable professional success. But you guys, I was struggling. What I didn't realize is that for 3 years, since the time that I was promoted to run the internal communications team, is I was hustling for my worthiness. I didn't believe I belonged in those rooms. And so I had no boundaries about work. I worked all the time. And it started to take its toll. And I probably was suffering from depression. The anxiety that I was experiencing was suffocating. I literally cried on my way to work every day. I would leave messages to some of my friends to be like, I don't know how I'm going to get through today. Because I dreaded every day so much. Y'all, I've been doing battle-tested events for 4 years. I cry every single time, so I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Like, it happens. And so after 3 years of dealing with like this intense stress, this is last year, by the way, I tell my husband, I think I'm ready for a change. I think maybe I'm the one that can fix this, but I got a good gig. I'm not gonna rush into anything else. I'm gonna find a company whose mission I believe in, that values its employees, that values me, that's rewarding and challenging, and that pays well, because champagne tastes, right? So I told Corey this at like late December, early January, and on January 18th, I applied for the job that I'm in today. So clearly, I took a lot of time to think about this. And on March 26th, I started at LinkedIn. I run a sales insights team for our most strategic clients across the globe. And I love it. It's amazing. Around this time, 10 years ago, if I would have stayed in the military, I would be retiring. I'd be middle of my transition right now. Instead, I work for one of the largest, or the world's largest, professional social networks. I have equity in one of the largest global companies in the world, which BT Dubs is about to reach the $1 trillion market capital if the economy keeps moving the way that it does. I have a therapist. I love that that's the thing that you guys clapped at. They're like, yes, thank God she's got a therapist. I have a therapist who's helping me understand, like, what does professional success and thriving as a person look like? I run a nonprofit that is trying to enact change for a community that I care deeply about. I'm surrounded by amazing people, veterans and non-veterans, who love me exactly as I am. And the best part is, I'm just getting started. Thank you.